once in a while, a hunting story makes national news. Unfortunately, when this happens, it's usually a tragic story.
Continuing coverage, 2 counts of first-degree murder. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation filed arrest warrants today against 70-year-old David Vowell.
He's accused of killing Chance Black and Zachary Groves.
He's accused of killing 2 men near Reelfoot Lake yesterday after an argument. TBI says he's still out there and considered armed and dangerous.
And this is exactly what happened with an incident earlier this year on Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee. 2 duck hunters were killed in a shooting. Another one was found dead. Despite all the stories around this tragedy, no one could explain why or how it happened. I'm Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson, and today I'm joined by Senior Deputy Editor Natalie Krebs, who has been reporting on this story for months. Hey, Nat.
Hey, Alex.
How did you first hear about what happened on Reelfoot?
So the shooting happened on Monday, January 25th, and I heard about it the next morning. Our associate editor, Joe Genzel, first read about it on Facebook in a waterfowl hunting group that he follows. Joe and I wrote a short news brief for OutdoorLife.com. I kept track of the story and wrote another short follow-up piece later that weekend. Both stories were tough to report and to fact-check because at the time there wasn't much official information available, so it wasn't actually clear what had happened.
Yeah, so as you started digging into this, figuring out more about the story, reading more reports, what did you find?
I found a lot of conflicting information. Initially, we knew that 2 men in their mid-20s had died, Chance Black and Zach Grooms. We also knew that a 70-year-old man, David Vowell, was wanted for questioning. That's the only thing the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation would say when I contacted them. They wouldn't even confirm that the men had been hunting. Meanwhile, local media is reporting that 2 duck hunters have been shot. Within 24 hours of the incident, warrants have been issued for Vowell's arrest on 2 counts of first-degree murder. 2 days after the shooting, so the next day, we learn about the existence of a 4th hunter, and his accounts they ended up in the news, and they were a little bit confusing. As best we could tell, he had witnessed the shootings and reportedly tried to get his friends to safety.
Okay, so you've learned that there's a witness who survived. Obviously, you're hoping to get in contact with him.
Yeah, the reason that I wanted to talk to him was because he wasn't quoted directly anywhere. No media had spoken to him and quoted him. A secondhand version of his account was out there. So from a fact-finding mission, to really get to the bottom of the story, I needed to talk to him. And the way I was able to do that was there's a podcast based out of Northwest Tennessee called Back to the Lodge. And they aired an episode that week about helping to clean out the blinds after the blind that this guy Crabtree was hunting out of had been released as a crime scene. They seemed to know him, and they seemed to know more about what had happened than anybody I had seen. So I reached out to them, and they appreciated the coverage that we had done so far. They thought it was respectful. I think it was a little less than 2 weeks after the incident, and I got a text saying, "Hey, come to breakfast tomorrow for an interview with Jeff Crabtree." So I got in the truck and drove to Tennessee.
Yeah, some of the accounts or the rumors on social media that those guys were trying to, kind of dispel, what were those?
The rumors covered everything from arguments over a duck to Crabtree shooting his own buddies to provoking Vowell and shooting Vowell and abandoning him on the lake. There was a little bit of everything.
Okay, so you've got this invite to interview Crabtree, and you're headed out to Reelfoot. What is Reelfoot Lake like? Like, it's a really well-known waterfowl hunting destination. I've heard of it. Lots of people have hunted there. So what's Reelfoot like, and what about the community surrounding it? What are they like?
Reelfoot is unique. The lake is in Northwest Tennessee, and it borders the Missouri and Kentucky state lines, so smack in the Mississippi Flyway. The lake was formed from the Mississippi during the New Madrid earthquakes in 1811 and 1812. So it's pretty shallow. It's full of cypress trees, and part of it is a national wildlife refuge. There's a ton of migrating and wintering ducks and geese that use it. And as a result, there's a long history of waterfowling on Reelfoot. There are more than 300 permanent duck blinds, some of which are private, others are public. Anyone who hunts a blind puts out these massive decoy spreads and leaves them all season long. The lake itself is relatively remote, so most of the folks who hunt it, they kind of live nearby in this network of small towns. Everyone knows everyone or has a buddy who knows somebody or knows of someone. There aren't that many degrees of separation. These are friendly people who aren't used to this kind of thing happening.
And how about the person that you're there to interview, Jeff Crabtree? What's he like?
Jeff Crabtree is one of those folks who's lived his whole life in Northwest Tennessee, and actually in the same county. He grew up in Obion County, he works as a farmhand, and he loves to duck hunt. Crabtree is 58, and he hunts with a bunch of guys in their 20s because his own generation aged out. He's the kind of guy who shakes your hand and looks you in the eye and notices when your plate is empty and asks if you want more bacon. He's pretty frank, which was immediately apparent when I met him. He was direct about what happened and just as clear about elements of the shooting that he couldn't explain. If he didn't understand what happened, he said he didn't know for sure.
Mr. Crabtree has told the same story consistently.
This is the sheriff of Obion County, Carl Jackson.
There's no way somebody could have made that story up that quick and consistently told it. If you're going to tell a story, most of the time, you got to have time to think about the story. You got to have time to put it together. And, his story was consistent. And people want to sit there and Monday morning quarterback him. And honestly, I mean, he... any way you look at it, he experienced a lot of trauma that day himself, and he's got to live with that day.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Okay, so now you are at Reelfoot and you're interviewing Jeff Crabtree. You've actually interviewed him several times, but we're not using his audio for this episode. Why is that?
Right. So I record my interviews for accuracy in my reporting. I was not intending to use those audio recordings for a podcast. The reason he didn't want to be featured in this podcast is because he's trying to heal and to move on. He just wanted to tell his story and set the record straight and be done with it. I should also add that I spoke with Carla Vowell, David Vowell's wife. She also didn't want her audio used for this. If you want to hear the direct quotes, which are really critical to this story, you can check out the full written story. The link is in the show notes. And I get why they didn't want their voices on the show. Like, I tried my best to be mindful of the folks that I interviewed, that they lost someone that they cared about or loved. And the best way to respect that was to get to the bottom of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you get into Crabtree's actual account, tell me, who was he hunting with that day and where were they?
Crabtree was hunting with Zach Grooms and Chance Black. So Zach is 25. He also works as a farm manager during the growing season, and he has duck season off. So he and Crabtree would often hunt during the week, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with another buddy. But Crabtree and Zach were two core members of the blind that they shared. And Chance Black was good buddies with Zach. They went to high school together. Chance worked at Final Flight Outfitters in Union City near the lake. Crabtree knows Chance. They've hunted together a few times. And it's just the three of them hunting on a Monday morning while most of their buddies are at work. And they are hunting out of public draw blind 58, which is one of the better public blinds on Reelfoot. It's on the north end of the lake. It faces the National Wildlife Refuge. And the structure itself is not like a traditional duck blind. I mean, it's a structure built out of scrap wood. There's an attached boathouse that leads into a kitchen that runs along the back of the blind. And then there's a wall of rubber curtains that separates the kitchen and the shooting holes.
Okay, so one more thing before we get into Crabtree's account. Explain why his account of what happened that day is so critically important for understanding this whole event.
Yeah, so the only account we have of what happened is Crabtree's, which investigators believe. He's the only survivor of the shootings, and law enforcement says that all the physical evidence supports his version of events. His story is also important to the families. Like, I spoke to Zach Grimms' mom, and she's grateful that Crabtree survived and has the story to tell her because she knows more about how her son died. There are also some folks who doubt Crabtree's story. Friends and family of David Vowell, some of them, don't believe the entirety of Crabtree's version of events. They say it's inconsistent with the David Vowell they knew, and they have their own theories about what happened. Investigators that I spoke with said there's no evidence to disprove a few of these theories, but there's also no evidence to support them either.
You know, if they want to talk bad about Mr. Crabtree, then show me the evidence. If you got some evidence that he did this, then help us out with it. Or leave him alone.
So, according to Crabtree, what did actually happen that day on Reelfoot?
Apart from the pouring rain and thunderstorms, it started as a regular day of duck hunting. Crabtree, Zach, and Chance left their regular boat ramp on the north end of the lake. They went to their normal blind, public draw blind number 58, and they shot some ducks. They were out there for several hours when a stranger in a duck boat approached their blind and said he wanted to hunt with them. Zach went out into the boathouse to talk to him, and the stranger climbed into their blind and shot Zach, who was still standing in his own boat in the boathouse. Crabtree disarmed the man, David Vowell, grabbed Vowell out of the blind, threw him in the boat, and headed back to the boat ramp for help. It was on the way back to the boat ramp that Vowell picked up a shotgun that was in the bottom of Zach's boat and shot Chance. And that's when Crabtree threw Vowell overboard. He threw him out of the boat and continued on to the boat ramp to call for help.
Okay, so a stranger comes to their blind, and that is Vowell. Does he say anything when he gets there?
He doesn't say much. Really, the only words that Crabtree heard were from Zach saying something like, "Can I help you?" And those were really the only words that Crabtree heard until he kind of looked into the back of the blind and saw this strange man standing at the entrance. He had his shotgun rolled over, and at the time, Crabtree thought he was loading it. Later, he wondered if Vowell was checking to make sure it was loaded. He was about to say, "Hey, you need to get up in the front of the blind to load your gun," and the man pivoted out to the boathouse, and the gun went off. Crabtree hears a splash out in the boathouse and yells to Chance that this man had shot Zach, and takes a few steps and disarms Vowell. He jerks the shotgun out of his hand. That's when Crabtree says to him, "Who the hell are you?" And this man replied, "David Vowell." And Crabtree asked him, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And David Vowell said, "I don't know."
So Crabtree manages to disarm Vowell. Why didn't he shoot him? Why didn't he knock him out? He put Vowell into the boat with them, but he didn't do anything beyond that. Why not?
At that point, Crabtree thought the gun had accidentally gone off. He didn't think that Vowell had intentionally shot anybody, and so to him, there's no reason to shoot him. He did shove Vowell as he went by to try and help Zach, like his goal was to just get to his buddy and help him. Chance and Crabtree are trying to pull Zach over the gunnel and into the boat, and it strikes Crabtree that this guy needs to be held accountable. Like, he's almost certain that Zach is dead. Zach is not responsive. And so he gets up and he goes back into the blind, grabs Vowell and shoves him into the boat. And at that point, they head back to the launch.
Okay, so all four of them are now in a boat heading back to the launch, and Vowell had been disarmed. How is he able to shoot Chance?
The four of them are in the boat. Zach is on the port side, not moving. Vowell is on his hands and knees huddled over on the starboard side. Crabtree is on the motor trying to get the boat on plane. He's only able to hit like 5 miles an hour. He's having boat trouble. There's a lot of water in the boat. And so Chance gets up on the bow of the boat to try and even out so that they can get on plane. He's up there when Crabtree spots a shotgun in the bottom of the boat. It's their shotgun. It's the shotgun that they use to shoot crippled ducks when they go retrieve ducks. And it's lying in the bottom of the boat next to Vowell. And Crabtree spots it and he's yelling at Chance, to get the gun and make sure it's unloaded. Crabtree has time to yell 2 or 3 times. I mean, they're just a minute away from the blind. They have not gotten very far on the lake. And Chance can't hear him, and Val picks up the shotgun. Chance hears something or sees something, turns as Val is raising the gun, and Chance is starting to push the barrel out of the way, and he's just not fast enough. Val shot him in the lower ribs. And that was the point where Crabtree realized, he told me, Val was there to deliberately kill them.
Okay, so at that point he says he realizes Val's intent. What does he do next?
At that point, Val turns toward Crabtree, and Crabtree just gets his hands on the barrel and jerks it out of his hands. The quickest way to him was not to turn it around and shoot Val. It was he just had this gun by the barrel in his hands, and he lifted it up over his head and swung it like a sledgehammer and hit Val on top of the head. It didn't knock Val out, but it knocked him over, and Crabtree just threw the shotgun in the bottom of the boat and threw him overboard. They were in a channel that takes you back to the boat launch. It's called the Bayou de Chêne. Where he threw him out was relatively shallow. Val could stand. He was a few feet away from a bank, and Crabtree took off for the boat ramp. The last time he saw Val, Val was sort of trying to get stood up. Crabtree said he didn't know if Val had a pistol on him, if he was carrying or what, and he just wanted him out of the boat.
All right, so Crabtree then gets his buddies back to the boat launch, or he calls for help. What happens next?
He gets back to the boat launch, and he's looking to see if there's anybody in the parking lot, and there's not. Everybody's still out hunting, or they're not there because it's stormy and a Monday. So he overshoots the takeout by about a quarter of a mile and lands his boat across from the first house along the Bayou de Chêne. Runs across the street, he bangs on the door, and the woman who answers the door calls 911 for him. But at that point, it was too late. By the time Crabtree goes back to the boat, both Zach and Chance are dead.
So when the authorities finally arrive, Val is still out there. Do they go searching for him, and do they find him?
It takes a little bit for investigators to coordinate because of the logistical nature of trying to investigate a crime scene on the lake. So they arrive, but they don't have boats. The boat that they do have access to, Zach Groom's boat, is a crime scene. Like, the boat itself is declared a crime scene. Both men are in it. There's evidence in it. They can't use that. So they call the TWRA, the State Wildlife Agency, and they help provide a lot of boats and game wardens who know the lake and are familiar with it. By the time they get investigators out on the lake, they determine that Val is not in any of the blinds on the lake, and they can't find him.
We knew that he had a handgun carry permit, so we did not know if we did find him and he was alive, if he was going to be armed.
This is Deputy Landon Kelly of the Obion County Sheriff's Department.
So it was a very intense couple hours while we were clearing the blinds out and securing all that. It's a very intense operation when you're doing something like that, when you're looking for a suspect / victim.
Okay, so Val's missing. They can't find him. But what do they find when they're out there?
They find a few things. They find Val's shotgun on the floor of blind 58, where Crabtree said he left it. There was an empty hull stuck in the action, which is why Crabtree figures he was not shot the first time he tried to disarm Val. The area around Val's blind smelled like propane, and they found a propane tank in the kitchen of the blind with the valve open and charred paper towels on the griddle. Investigators didn't then, and they still don't know what to make of that. They found Val's boat with the motor still idling, some 400 to 500 yards from blind 58 when he entered their blind. And Crabtree untied that when he left. I don't think we mentioned that. They found Val's vehicle across the lake where he normally parks. They found a footprint near where Crabtree said he last saw Val. Whether TBI has matched that footprint to Val or to somebody else, I don't know. That's not public information yet. They found Val's glasses in Grooms's boat, along with the second shotgun. I do know shot pellets and wads were recovered during Black and Grooms's autopsies, so investigators likely found additional physical evidence. They just won't say what. And to your original question, they do not find David Val.
But eventually they do find Val, right? How is Val's body recovered?
Val's body was found by a pair of duck hunters who were out looking for loose decoys in the Bayou de Chêne. That was Saturday, January 30th. So 5 days after the shooting. And part of what made the search so difficult and took so long was all the rain and the rising water that happened that week. They actually had to call off the search at one point.
When they recover his body, were they able to determine a cause of death?
The cause of death was initially reported as hypothermia and drowning. And that was in the preliminary verbal autopsy. So what the medical examiner says to law enforcement a few days after recovering David Val. Val didn't have any gunshot wounds, and he had minimal physical wounds, none that could cause death. The toxicology report and the official autopsy were recently completed, and the manner and cause of death were both listed as could not be determined. I have not been able to speak to the medical examiner about why the doctor could not make that determination.
Okay, so this is the biggest question of the entire incident. Why would David Val do this?
Yeah, that's the big mystery that still remains at the heart of this whole case after this giant. No one really knows why Val would have done this, but that's the conclusion law enforcement and District Attorney General Tommy Thomas have made, that David Val shot Zach Grooms and Chance Black. All of the available evidence supports Crabtree's version of events, according to the Obion County Sheriff's Department. But it's still very puzzling to everyone who knew David Val, because Val doesn't have a history of violence or any criminal background. His friends and family describe him as friendly and funny and considerate. More than one person described him as the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his back. Crabtree told me that it appeared something wasn't mentally right with Val at the time. He said, quote, "I don't know what went on, but something snapped, something flipped." And the investigators who I spoke with don't doubt that Val is actually responsible for the murders. They just don't have a motive they can point to. The main basis they have for this theory is a series of conversations that Val had with his family and friends in the days leading up to the shootings.
Okay, and what were those conversations about?
So there were 3 conversations that I know about, and they were about how David Val thought he had dementia. The Wednesday before the shootings, he sat down with his wife, Carla, and told her that he had dementia, and she was very taken aback. She asked if he had a diagnosis that she didn't know about, and he said no. He Googled it. He had a similar conversation with a close hunting buddy the next day, but that Saturday, Val brought it up a third time. He was in the blind with his buddies hunting, and he made an announcement that he was done duck hunting, that he was forgetting things he was supposed to remember, and he also mentioned that he had dementia. In other words, Val thought he had dementia and his family and friends didn't. He did have diagnosed depression and was recently prescribed an antidepressant. Val actually had a doctor's appointment scheduled for the afternoon of the shootings.
The beginning of this year, this duck season, I knew something wasn't really on with him. Something was kind of flipping back and forth, and then he finally told us that, his problems that he thought he had.
This is Matthew Gingras, a 19-year-old hunter who considered David Val his second father. He's speaking just a few weeks after the incident happened.
The previous 9 years, it's always get up, let's go. He's always in the shooting hole, always having fun and enjoying things. But until about 3 weeks ago, it's when it really hit and told us that he was done duck hunting. And that hurt me because he introduced duck hunting to me, and it's really hurt knowing what happened and how it happened.
Going back a little bit to the story itself, those initial rumors after the incident, a lot of them focused on this idea that there was an altercation over ducks, like hunters competing over spots. Oh, was there any truth to those rumors?
As far as I know, and as far as investigators have shared with me, there was no truth to those rumors about an argument on the day of the shootings. By all accounts, including hunters I interviewed from both blinds, there was only one disagreement that ever arose between the two groups, from Crabtree's blind and the blind that David Val hunted out of. It was a single argument, and it happened on Christmas Eve, a full month before the shootings. And While that dispute may have been between hunters in those blinds, none of the foremen present at the shootings were a part of that argument.
So that social media rumor mill, I mean, that must have been really hard for the families.
It was. I mean, some folks were able to ignore it somehow, like Tina Grooms, Zach Grooms' mom, didn't turn on the TV for 2 weeks because local media got it wrong too. Chance Black's mom could not stay off social media. She was trying to figure out what happened to her son and why he died, and she read everything that she could read about it. And that included a lot of rumors on Facebook. The Val family got death threats as a result of a lot of the coverage. A lot of comments on social media were referring to David Val as a monster. They threatened to kill members of Val's family. And so the Martin police patrolled their neighborhoods and kept a police car parked outside the family business the week that Val was missing and the week of his funeral. Val family also got a lot of their information about what was happening with the investigation from media and social media. It's how Richard Val says they learned about the details of the shootings that his brother was accused of.
In this case, no question, I gave out more information than I would in a routine case.
This is the District Attorney General of Obion and Weakley counties, Tommy Thomas, who spoke to the media in the week that David Val was missing.
What the concern is that we definitely do not want to try a case in the media. However, in this case, I really felt that all the evidence indicated that Val would not be found alive, and I wanted to get as much information out there as possible, primarily because the conspiracy theories.
How about the local communities? I mean, these are largely communities based around duck hunting and the outdoors. So what was the response there like?
That was one of the encouraging parts of this story, was that the local community response was overwhelming in their support of the families. Everybody rallied around the people that they knew and supported them as best as they knew how. And so did the waterfowling community. I mean, as troubling as a lot of the rumors and misinformation online were, there were also random duck hunters who were donating to like a GoFundMe campaign from all over the US and up in Canada. It really affected a lot of waterfowlers.
So it's months later now after the shooting. Is the investigation closed? Did officials find anything else after all these months?
Officially, the investigation is still open. The last pieces of evidence investigators were expecting were the completed autopsy reports of the three men. If there's anything else, the public isn't yet privy to it and probably won't be. TBI doesn't make their investigations public, nor are they allowed to by Tennessee state law. Tennessee has some of the most restrictive public information laws in the country. There will be a sealed grand jury session in June, but Jeff Crabtree isn't on trial, nor is he a person of interest in this case. And you can't charge a suspect posthumously, so David Val isn't on trial either.
I don't know what happened, but I'm satisfied that Crabtree didn't do it. The only other suspect or possibility would be Val, which is consistent with his story.
Even though this case is generally resolved, it's not really over for the people there. What do you think the long-lasting effects are going to be from this tragedy?
I think hunters are going to remember this story about what happened on Reelfoot for a long time. Hunters will remember it when things get tense or they get frustrated with other hunters on public waters. Right? These deaths weren't over ducks, but that initial impression will stick with a lot of people who don't read this story or don't agree with law enforcement's conclusions. I think it also brings up conversations of mental health among hunters, whatever those may be or why. That's something many sources mention that they're going to think about from now on. But really, I think that the biggest impact is that people died. Parents lost their sons. You have a wife who lost her husband. All three men were brothers to somebody. Jeff Crabtree lost 2 hunting buddies. Lots of hunters lost their hunting buddies.
I want people to know that even one of their last acts on Earth was some stranger coming up asking to hunt with them, and they were like, yeah, come on,
that was just, they were good people.
This is Cody Black, Chance Black's older brother.
And then with Chance, from what I understand, after Zach got shot, Chance jumped in to help Zach, and they were both, him and Crabtree both were ignoring Val. Like, they were just worried about Zach, and that's, again, you know, putting others in before themselves kind of deal. So I just want people to know that it wasn't an argument, it wasn't, you know, anything like that. They were actually being kind to Val, and then he took advantage of that.
The Outdoor Life podcast is edited and produced by Senior Deputy Editor Natalie Krebs, and it's hosted by me, Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson. Our music is composed and performed by Tyler Schwartz. Next week on the podcast, we have hunting editor Andrew McKean with the story of the world record elk that almost wasn't.